Hello, welcome to Love Community Group. Today we are talking about community, very appropriate for our name of our group. And me and Kelsey are going to lead the discussion. We have an amazing group of community builders here, and we're excited to get the discussion started. So I'm going to go around and just introduce where I met everybody and have them introduce themselves a little bit, and then we'll jump right into the discussion. So where should I start? I'll start on the left here with Adam. This is Adam Mefford.
Hello.
And we figured out we met in Pasadena somewhere, probably at a startup weekend or Currency. He has a group called Currency, which is focused on building community and kind of professional networks and getting the most out of communities. And would you like to add anything?
Sure. Adam Mefford. I've lived in LA since fall of 2003. I studied industrial design at Art Center. Founded an entrepreneurs group for the school in 2004. Ran an event series called Mindshare LA from 2006 to 2011. And have run an event called Currency since then, which strives to add community support for the individual entrepreneurs in our network, because as anyone who's undertaken a new venture knows, it's very lonely, it's very psychologically challenging, personally challenging. And it really can be aided by finding people who believe in us, can add their trusted perspective to the various challenges that arise. So I'm grateful to be here.
This is I printed out his brochure so I can pass it around if you want to look at it. And then this is Anna Butler. We met from Social Enterprise Alliance.
I actually think we met when we painted
A Happy City LA. Happy City LA.
Yeah, you did fantastic. You painted. I don't know. You did something really. Yeah, a ghost in your it was where you drink and then paint.
It was so fun.
Yeah.
An art event. Yeah, making art.
Exactly.
That was our Happy City moment. And then she is a partner at Sustainable Law Group, which is one of my favorite law groups in the whole wide world. And what do you want to add anything?
Yeah, sure. So Anastasia Butler, attorney at Sustainable Law Group. We focus primarily on helping social entrepreneurs, nonprofits, green businesses, full service business law firm. So we do everything from creating the company to capital raises all the way down to dissolutions and buyouts. So.
And this is David Cutter. We met I might know you the longest of everybody here.
I'm thinking it was the Time Bank.
And it was the Time Bank.
Yeah.
It was Northeast LA Time Bank that we met. Yep. And he is a piano teacher extraordinaire. And would you like to add anything else?
Sure. So also helped co-found Transition Pasadena. So it's another community building organization working very heavily in the Time Bank. So I'm a coordinator of the Pasadena neighborhood. And then I went into business about 10 years ago teaching piano, and have since discovered, this is too long a story, but just there's a whole community building aspect to this. Pianists always have to study at home alone, and so they don't get the orchestra experience that other instruments get. So I figured out a way to give them a community experience with other pianists all at once. A piano orchestra. So
he's got 5 pianos in one space where people can play together.
Actually, there's 7 in there. But
7!
We won't talk about that.
Have you seen the piano downstairs yet?
What was that?
Have you seen the piano downstairs yet?
I missed it.
You'll
have to come on down now.
Point me.
We'll have to do the tour after, yeah. And then this is Jordan Service. I'm the most closely related to Jordan. We met because my sister married his brother.
That is true.
And he is an amazing director, editor, visual effects expert, and VR expert as well. I mean, and even also drones also.
I have my hand in a lot of things, yeah.
Videographer, let's say.
Yeah.
And you want to...
I guess for the community group, I would be also interested in talking about, I'm also an entrepreneur coming from the VR world, but also I'm looking at blockchain technology and how blockchain technology is going to impact communities in the future, and how we can come up with
blockchain technology.
So blockchain technology is like Bitcoin. It's if you've heard of Bitcoin, that's basically all running on blockchain, and it's going to change a lot of how we approach contracts and just money and trade in the future. And I'm really interested in creating and scaling up a human-based sort of community unit that could compete on scales that really only businesses and current more advanced structures of capital can compete on. So like right now there's this issue of the family unit doesn't really compete at scale, and so how do you scale up sort of communities? And so I'm looking at tying a housing solution to a blockchain solution. So
unless you're the Trump family.
Unless you're the Trump family, right, exactly, right. Well, he's really a brand, he's not a human, right?
Bingo.
Yeah, so it's like a cooperative space where artists can live.
That's a short and simple way of explaining it. Yeah, it's really complex and new. And
it is complex and complicated.
And complicated, but the long and the short of it is, how could you create places that could be artistically led, but are really just like any group sort of identity that you would want. So if it's art or a specific type of art, that could be great for that group of people. Or if it's geriatric caregiving, it could be great for people. Anything.
Combination of people, yeah.
Right. So.
This is Alfonso Delgado, and we met working on Rizzoli Isles. He is a producer, mostly focusing on post-production.
Correct.
And he also is a writer. He's writing a TV series that it's a very personal story, and it is an awesome story, and I can't wait until it comes out. And what else would you like to add?
I also developed a 3-phase educational program. I grew up in the 80s, in the 90s in Ball Heights when it was like a little bit more violent than what it is now.
Yeah.
And one of the biggest issues was pairing up. Whenever I spoke to some of those kids or people my age and I asked, what would you do differently when you were growing up? You said, if I would have just followed sports, I would have done this. If I didn't do this, I probably would never went down that path. So what I did is I developed one where we follow these people when they have to give back and find a teenager there that's actually going through that.
Very cool. I didn't know that.
And then after that, the second phase is we actually follow the teens because no one knows what they're going through but them. But they always hold it to themselves, and that's a big issue. Now, after that is who gives birth to them, because they're learning something from someone. And then we go to the third phase, and that's where we follow.
Or like their new life.
Who's the adults that are educating them? So I developed that. That one's kind of complicated because the network that wanted to see more violence. And in those type of worlds, you just don't ask for that. It's going to happen on its own. You don't go asking and looking for it. So to fabricate that, it kind of put everything on hold.
For entertainment world.
Yeah, so that we had to put that on hold.
Things.
Yeah, so it's a little complicated. And then the next series that I started writing, that's actually based on my life story. So, but I'll share a little bit more later.
Okay. Yeah, we have plenty of time to talk about projects later also.
Yeah.
So this is Holly Bachman. We met at the LA Chamber, and she has you have like so many amazing things going on right now, but one thing that is really amazing to me is Mixed Roots, the foundation. She has a nonprofit foundation that is very focused on post-adoption services for the family. There's not really a lot of stuff that does that at all right now. And there are, as we can all imagine, there's a lot of, I don't want to say issues, but like just challenges that come with all of the people in the families. And she helps them really lead a happier life, or lead a more fulfilling life by kind of putting the pieces together in a holistic way. And then, do you want to share anything else?
Sure. So as Amy said, so Holly, and I also include my middle name, so Holly Chun Hung Bachman. No, but because just when I do self-introductions to kind of educate people that listen. So I actually was adopted from South Korea, grew up in Minnesota, and then lived in San Francisco for 8 years. And then I've been here in LA for 3 years. And my other hat is, as Amy mentioned, I actually have 2 other hats. I co-chair the LA Chamber's Nonprofit Council. We just celebrated our 1-year anniversary. And then I also consult, that kind of helps pay the bills, is the California Consulting, and they're the largest grant writing firm in the state, and we help secure funds, local, state, federal, for schools, nonprofits, special districts, and cities. And so, but yeah, my real kind of passion and kind of my whole kind of life story has been really my being adopted, and then also in a transracial adoption, meaning my whole family's white. And so dealing with the race and culture issues,
And I actually just really briefly had the opportunity to go back to Korea twice. And so my first trip to Korea was actually when I started a high school culture diversity group called Mixed Roots. And that was essentially really raising awareness and bringing diversity and multiculturalism. And then over 20 years later, I had a chance to go back to Korea a second time and visit my orphanage for the first time. I was actually 3.5 years old when I was adopted, so got to see baby pictures. I was just sharing earlier, I found out that my real birthday is actually August 15th and not August 10th. So just a lot of different factors, you know, as you talk about challenges, you know, not knowing your medical health background, you know, having that blood connection. And so, yeah, so working with the foundation now is we're raising awareness, raising funds for the adoption foster care community, and really creating that community, which I'll share more later. So, but I'm honored to be here and be invited, and you know, thank you.
This is Janelle Hu. We met at Coro. Coro is a leadership development program that's really based on like a holistic look at the community, at what we need to do to be a good, solid, sustainable community. And so it's there's like a very heavy public arm to it as well, since a lot of, you know, politicians kind of deal with that public stuff. And oh gosh, I'm blanking on the name of tell us the name of the place that you work.
Sure, hi. Thanks for inviting me, Amy, and nice to meet all of you here today and all of you out there. My name is Janelle Hu. I've been working with Asian Americans Advancing Justice, Los Angeles, here in Southern California. It's a legal aid, civil rights nonprofit organization, and we've been around for about 34 years, so it's a community-based organization. And it was interesting to hear Amy talk about what we are going to be, you know, opining on this evening, because as I recently moved back from Washington, D.C., where I lived for 14 years, I grew up and I was raised in California, but just returned to California about 3.5 years ago. And so just been thinking about community, both in the sense of the organization for which I work, which is really exciting because we represent low-income, immigrant, limited English proficient community members, not just within, although the organization says, you know, Asian Americans, but Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, Pacific Islanders, Latino, African American, other like Arab and Middle Eastern, South Asian communities. So just thinking about community, not just in respect of what we, you know, who we work with and who we work for, but who we ally with. And also been thinking and really wrestling, especially moving back to the city after having been gone for so long, of like rebuilding community and what that looks like, right? So on a professional context, right? But like starting anew, new-ish, but also in a personal context, you know, what does it look like to have community? And I was asking Amy, like, are we talking about kitchen cabinet community, like our own personal community? So yeah, I've just been really wrestling with that question, and still like working through a lot of that, and I think we all probably could relate in some degree. But it's funny that you had mentioned the piano. I really thought that there was something wrong with me. I played piano throughout my whole childhood, and I thought, well, but I gotta sit here and I gotta practice, but I want to go out and play. And I thought I would really prefer maybe if I had play the piccolo or the ukulele, where I had something where I could go out and play with people all the time. So clearly I like enjoy the community aspect of both like working with and playing alongside and living with and challenging and being challenged by people around me.
This is David Fridley, who we've had on before on Love Community Group, and he has designed an awesome application which is called Civil Pursuits. And we're actually going to use it to develop not develop our values so much as develop like the wording of the values and to get buy-in of the values for Love Community Group as we continue to develop as a community. And I'll let you say anything else that you want to add.
Sure. Well, so I'm David Fridley, and Civil Pursuit is the idea of how do we sort of get together online and solve these problems that basically have us stuck. And there's actually in person, there's this idea of deliberative discussions where there'll be a professional facilitator, he'll get 100 people or something like that and break them up into small tables and lead them through a discussion. and they will actually come to understand each other and work together and find solutions. But when all these people get together on Facebook, it kind of goes the other direction. And so I'm really looking at, well, how do you take what works in person and make that work online? And I talk with professional deliberators about some of this, and some of them are like, well, you can't do it online. It has to be, in person. And so it's like, well, let's break it down and see, because basically we gotta keep trying. We're just not going to make it go fast enough. But as far as community is concerned, that's actually some of the things that that people bring up. It's like, well, online, do you feel like you belong or trust these people, or are you willing to be vulnerable? And so how do we make that? How do we make those connections online and feel like we're part of this big community called America or Earth? That's a big question.
And I'll let Kelsey, my co-host,
I'll introduce
herself.
myself. So my name is Kelsey. I haven't met most of you before tonight, but I run the Love Community Group here with Amy. And so I'm really excited as far as tonight goes. This space here is actually my husband, Robert, and it's our new business venture, and it's a turnkey production space for creatives with full photo, video, and music production capabilities. So I think that you'll probably love downstairs the full scoring space and stuff like that, and there's a piano, and I'm really excited about this particular conversation tonight because this is a newer venture for us, and as I've been, talking to people and starting to put into more words and get concrete about, really why we're here and what we're doing, it's really boiled down to two pieces: empowerment and community. And so the empowerment piece is about, at a very affordable rate, giving creatives top quality everything so that they can get out there and get their vision and their voice out in the world. And then the other piece is really trying to develop a community of people doing that. And so we're, exploring different ways and different applications within the business. We're doing supper clubs, and we're doing hosting a community group, and we're doing workshops and free events. So you guys are actually all welcome back here next Wednesday. We're going to have a free cocktail party. So it's exciting for me as someone a little bit, I feel like, newer in this sort of like public space of building community, to be able to participate in this conversation and get to hear from so many people who are already out there doing such amazing work. So thank you all for being here.
And then this is Dina Yunkin, who we met from Amy Turk, introduced us. Downtown Women's Center, one of my favorite organizations in Los Angeles. And she's going to come last time and talk about creativity, and then she ended up being able, this is one of her favorite topics, is community, so she ended up being able to come this time.
Yes, my name is Dina Youngkin. I work for the Downtown Women's Center, and we run a social enterprise called Made by DWC. So the social enterprise, we work completely with women living in poverty, living on the streets, living in homelessness. And we run 3 businesses where we have a cafe and gift boutique, we have a resale boutique, and then we have a handmade product line. So I oversee pretty much everything that has to do with the handmade product line, so distribution, running job training programs, design, all of that. And we use the product line to empower women to regain a social network, to re-engage with a skill or craft, to re-engage with the workforce, to build economic stability. A really cool thing about the product line is it's also a tool for us to advocate for women and for homeless issues, and we use it as a marketing tool. We have the cafe that people can come down and actually engage in a space, a community space where they can have a nice cup of coffee and do their work, and through that process hopefully learn something important about homeless issues.
Yeah, it's a beautiful space, and it's right where all the homeless population is there. So it's a good place for people to go in and engage with the population.
Yeah, it really acts as a bridge between sort of the loft dwellers or the financial district and other areas that are happening downtown and Skid Row, and it's a great space that can bring people together. And then with our handmade products, people come in and buy them, and then they gift them to other people. So we're now spreading that story. We're sharing the story of those women. It could be global. There's a lot of potential in where the products can end up and how we can share that story through a candle or a soap.
And then we have Howard Broadman. We met at Social Enterprise Alliance. We actually were in a competition against each other, and he blew me out of the water. He was so good. He's marketing extraordinaire, storyteller extraordinaire, and I'll let you tell a little bit more about yourself.
Thanks. It's funny. I relived that not that long ago. I'm Howard Broadman. I have a company called Sports and Social Change, and we do social impact marketing in the sports community. So the whole idea is really to kind of bring brands and nonprofits together and kind of help change the world through the power of sports. The sports community, I was talking with some people earlier. It's interesting when I say I work in sports, people immediately say, "Oh, what team do you work with, or what athlete?" Because most people think of sports as the world of professional sports, and there's certainly a big aspect to that, and that's kind of the sport for entertainment community. But there's a whole other piece, which is the sports people actually play. And that is a massive community and sub-communities within, whether you're a surfer or a snowboarder, or you play golf or tennis, or you do yoga or whatever it is, that's your community. But at the same time, you could be a Laker fan, a Dodger fan, a Chelsea fan, or whatever, that's also your community. So that's the great thing about sports, is it is a community building platform first and foremost. And what's cool about it is it's also a community around things people love and are super passionate about, and they're there for something fun. So what better place to be able to then activate them around some really important social issues. So that's kind of been my goal since I started. I worked through the sports industry for the last 20 plus years and saw a lot of these opportunities and said, well, wait a minute, how do we kind of take this big behemoth of an industry that generates a lot of money and a lot of media power and start to kind of focus it in on solving, some of these issues. And we've got an amazing roster of nonprofits that are in the sports community, and they, to a large degree, they get kind of unnoticed. They're really kind of below the radar, and my goal is to help those organizations kind of have a larger voice and get a seat at the table and really start to leverage the power of our industry to do more good.
All right, beautiful. Thank you, guys. That was excellent. So let's jump right into the question of what do we believe? What is community to you? What do you believe about it? Can we come up with a definition? I don't know. Who would like to start?
Well, I'll just kind of feel like it's always fun to be the first person. So I'll just get that started right away. And I'll say that as I was preparing for this conversation tonight, largely what I found is that community is very difficult to define. And when you can define it, it requires a tremendous amount of sacrifice from those who are committed to the community. And it can be very challenging, because ultimately to have true community, it requires this massive sort of buy-in from people, being willing to submit to what is greater for the whole group than for the individual. And I think that that's just very challenging in our very American society, where it's all about the individual, and that's sort of what's praised. But ultimately, I feel like it drives us further apart, right? Like, if the goal and what brings us happiness and joy is togetherness, then our obsession with individualism, can be very, very challenging. So that's been something I've been really coming up against personally as I've been learning a lot about community and being like, oh, so I'm gonna have to get uncomfortable. All right.
Well, I'll just jump in. I have 2 points that I think about when I think of community. The first one is when I think about freedom, and I think about what it means to be free. If I think about freedom, I definitely don't think about freedom by myself. I'm not actually free if I'm alone, right? And if I think about what I mean by freedom, what I mean is being able to express myself within my society and culture. So there's a part of community that is just like the water that you swim in, or the air that you breathe. It's just kind of the interface that you interact with the world around you. And then the other aspect of that is, you have to be in a group, but like you said, it's difficult. There's a sacrifice. So there's there's always going to be a need for great leaders to keep pushing it forward. And that, in my opinion, the whole reason why we even have society was to come together to go against nature as a group, right? And if we're taking our society and we're using that to create more competition between people, for the people who are organizing that competition's advantage, you're not actually creating a society, you're not creating a community. So a community, I think you have to have a sort of one shared story that you could say, yeah, we disagree about a lot of different things, but this is why we're united. You know, this is what brings us together. This is what we're looking forward to. So it's a bit complex, but
Yeah, well, jumping in on that, I think just maybe summarizing what both of you said is a group of people coming together with shared value or shared meaning or a shared purpose.
yeah.
And then, we can take off.
And I would add that I don't think it needs to be complicated. I mean, it certainly has complex aspects. If you're trying to build something, and it can get overwhelming and sacrificing. But I see it as it's 2, 3, or more people. Many more. But it could be as simple as 2 or 3 people together. And for me, it takes me beyond myself. I can be part of something beyond myself now, and so experience that diversity of people.
That's a good point.
And in diversity in time and space, and it's just bigger than me. So I think that's what I like.
I think there's that sense of belonging. I think with Mixed Roots, that was one of the reasons for creating, say, Mixed Roots is it was actually a high school culture diversity group, but then it evolved into like a foundation and creating a greater community. But for those that have been on the fringes, we work with a lot of the international foreign exchange students, and then of course, dealing with race and culture, and then of course all the other identities, but being able to bring those communities together to share the culture, but also to share identity, and to help make people feel like that they belong and that they're not on the outside.
I had a follow-up question from your introduction. The idea of identity is really multifaceted in this culture, and it's quite interesting. Do you, either presently or in future, do you foresee working with families and adopted children to think about how to craft that sense of belonging in terms of personal narrative?
Absolutely. In fact, we're working on that right now, literally. One of our partners is 23andMe and DNA testing. And one of the really roots of when you talk about your actual identity, your DNA, because we always talk about your DNA never changes. So, so if you can learn about your roots and say transracial adopted kids, and then we actually have families do it together, because we don't want them to feel like, oh, you're adopted, so you need to find your, which actually my generation of parents kind of, don't treat your child as anyone different, but yet we're gonna send you to a Korean heritage camp, and yet they didn't have to do that learning and education of Koreans because that they felt like and knowingly being just parents loving and caring, they didn't realize that was actually isolating because I grew up pretty much white, and so to be thrown into a group of Asian faces and people that I didn't know, even though on the outside people knew that I was Asian, but I didn't feel Asian, so that identity piece was really huge. So definitely that is always something that we're working on, and also from a health and medical standpoint too. When you feel like you don't have those really key pieces, being those resources. So,
actually, I think an interesting word that came up through everybody, and it's kind of obvious, but it's sharing, because that's really what a community is. And to your point, community can be it can be 2, 3 people can make a community as long as there's that interaction and there's that sharing. And that sharing means sometimes you're giving more and sometimes you're taking more, but at some point in time, it's going to reach an equilibrium. There has to be a balance of that. If it's everybody taking, then there is no community because there's probably not going to be anything left. And if everybody is just sharing and nobody's taking, then everybody's wanting to give and nothing's really happening. There's not as much community there either. So it's kind of an ever-changing system, and it could grow from 2 to 3 people to 2 to 3,000, but it could slide right back down again. It all depends. It never has a form or a structure to it. I think that's one of the interesting things about it. It's hard to define it because it doesn't really ever have a set format. It's always going to change. It's always changing.
Sorry.
Sorry, we're going back and forth.
I was just saying it's almost a different difference between a community and like an organization or something. Like you can community. I was thinking it was interesting. One of the things that came up was this idea.
The community we want to be, and not the negative community.
I had something that kind of came up for me a little bit. I think really while everyone was talking. I saw this sign once, and it said, it was an Instagram post or something, and it said, create more of what you need. And so I feel like that's really kind of what came up for me while you guys were talking, where it's the idea that like community is something we create, and we create it kind of piggybacking, I think, of what you were saying earlier, of like it's something that's something that's bigger than yourself. It's something that's it's not something you can experience out alone, right? And so you're creating it because it's something that you lack, or it's something you desire, or it's something you need more of. And so rather than sitting, I think this is the essence of community, right? Rather than sitting back and saying, I sure wish somebody would do that, you know, and judging everyone who's doing it and not doing it the way that you want to do it. It's taking ownership and saying, I'm going to create this thing that I desire on behalf of another person. And I feel like that's really like, I feel like I really connected with what you were saying, that you were doing it, even you as a recipient were doing it for still another person.
Participating, showing up.
Yeah.
I think another theme that I'm hearing is fluidity. It's not one thing, so it's scalable, but that scale can be made up of all different aspects too. So if it's a neighborhood, you know, it could be made up of culture and art and different, you know, identity, or if it's
and people will move in and move out.
Yeah, exactly. That you made me think of that with moving in and moving out, you know, so, you know, your community's changed, and how has Los Angeles changed since you came back and you had to relearn it, and there's different restaurants and there's different organizations to tap into, and so there's this constant movement, and you know, how do we participate and keep participating when things are constantly evolving, changing, flowing.
Which is a perfect segue into talking about what gets in the way of
successful
being a good community member and making a community that helps everybody live up to that accomplishes the shared purpose that a positive community would have.
What is the
That's
purpose?
what
What's the purpose?
People get in the way. I know, right?
There's no shared purpose. We don't have a shared purpose.
Politics.
Well, we're assuming the community is a positive community that has a shared purpose.
Well, but
and
keep
what
in
still
mind,
gets in the way.
that positive purpose community is built up of people who are probably like-minded, but as you get deeper in, it's really about what is everybody's, I want to say agenda, but what's their purpose? Why are they involved in the community?
Purpose.
And then it's how does that manifest? How does that really come out? And I think that, you know, I don't want to go too deep down the rabbit hole of the negative side, but you know, if we take religion as a community, as sub-communities within, and there are people within certain religions that have done very bad things, are those people still a part of that community? Is it up to the community to decide? Do they extricate those people? Do they say, no, we need to help bring those people back in? You know, where is that? And it can be the same for any community. I don't want to just paint religion as that. It can be no different, but that's, I think, the challenge. That's really what always gets in the way is people and ego and agenda and
values.
How does that all factor in? And values, absolutely.
Well, I want to add too, one of my longtime mentors came up with intent versus impact. And I think it's very powerful because speaking to what you're saying about when you join or be part of something, what are your true intentions? I mean, it could be even intentions of, you know, still going along with my theme with, you know, adopting a black child or loving someone this way, or, you know, being part of, you know, this group or that, you know, what is your true intention? And then taking a step further is that you could all have all the right intentions, but your impact could be completely different.
Yeah.
So kind of being...
It happens a lot,
yeah,
actually.
and the self-manifestation and the self-fulfilling prophecy too is, you know, not realizing, like, even in just interpersonal relationships, like I'm going through one right now saying, hey, I'm doing all this stuff, but the impact is doing the reverse. Right. And it's like you have to take a step back and like, whoa, and reassess kind of that intent.
Yeah, I think that what you said about intent is spot on because, yes, I agree, people are 99% of all problems. But I think, but that being said, I think if you really look at intent and you analyze the communities, and I think also it depends on the question, Because if you're talking about what prevents communities from following getting the impact that they want, because it seems like there's a lot of people here that want to do social change and change the way things are organized, but we have this intent, but we can't make the impact. And I think if you really start analyzing it, there's a structural issue here, that there's a certain level of intent at certain scales that does not get listened to. And it doesn't matter who you are, and if you don't have that organization, you will not pass that. And people are way too busy, and surviving is just what it is that we have a society that's organized to maximize profits, and it pits people to compete against each other rather than cooperate with each other. And so if you don't address the systemic issues, I don't think you can really match that intent to impact, because there's just so much systemic blocking, even if you had perfect people. You know.
Makes you
He's singing my song.
Why would you say that?
Well,
I just want to say too, though, I feel like if people are 99% of the problem, they're also 99% of the solution.
It's true.
Right?
I love it.
And I think the thing is I think to me, one of the first thing that comes to my mind when I think about what gets in the way of true community, I think it's brokenness. It's other people's brokenness. And so I think that's part of why, I think, so many of you guys come from these backgrounds of social change and structural change and things like that. And I'm curious to hear some of I know off the top of my head, probably you, of ideas you maybe have about what does it look like to communicate about community? What does it look like to help heal and be able to bring that about in a community setting? I feel like
it's like this.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's right. But as far as the work that the Downtown Women's Center is doing is, I think why I really resonate with it is that whether you're in our day center or you're in our cafe or you're working in the offices, there's it's a comfortable space, it's an inviting space, and it's a space where you feel safe and staff feels safe, and that allows the women that we serve a safe place to come and explore in a work setting. We allow vulnerability, and we allow them to come in and be able to make mistakes and not be judged for that, and then work on mentorship to get them to the next level or to meet them where they're at with their goals. That's the big thing, is just providing a space that meets you where you're at when you walk through the door. And I think that's really important as we come into a community as so many different people. You come into a place that feels safe for you to explore. And yes, this space is doing that as well. It's creating that a space of openness where we can all come together and discuss our ideas, backgrounds.
Right. Do you know someone named Latanya Renee?
I was going to say, I was going to say, you're all speaking to valid, what I'll call symptoms, and I think you're digging down into. Really, I think the issue is that we're all ensconced in a structure and a society that's built a certain way based on historical things.
That's true.
And I think one of the reasons we have unsolvable problems, quote, is we don't talk about these things in polite company. So I hope you'll indulge me because I want to talk about
Come on, bring it up.
So economy, that's it, and it's a 15th century notion that we're operating on, which is that there's infinite horizons out there that have infinite resources amongst them, and you just bring them back, and it's profit to pay back all the debt-based created money, and we're operating the same way today. And so that assumption is no longer true. The horizons are all known, they're finite, and the resources are just as finite. So we're operating like you can do infinite growth on a finite planet.
I see what you're saying. Okay,
and we can't.
It's kind of like in the 1700s, maybe you could say that there was more value in dominating over nature than there was in collaboration, right? And I think at a certain point in history, and I think it's clearly the Industrial Revolution, that the value of human collaboration is so much more than the value that you get from dominating over nature. So moving forward, if you're taking that model of dominating over nature and turning that back on culture,
but that's just one aspect.
Right. Yeah, and that's one aspect. Right.
Right. So all I'm saying, or to go deeper here, is we are reaching a point where our assumptions are no longer going to. They aren't working now. People are suffering because the economy doesn't work the way it used to, and the cry is more growth, and it's just you know, we can creep that up for some amount of time. Nobody knows how much time. But at some point, you know, it's going to get worse, and we have to start facing the fact that it's not working. And so, you know, in polite company, these conversations are going to have to start happening, because they're certainly not going to happen in the government or large institutions.
They start happening though when it affects people personally.
Correct.
Right. That's really when it is. When you can't sit at home on Sunday night
That's
and
why
watch
we
Game
have
of Thrones
President
is
Trump.
when you're going to go, oh shit.
What the heck?
Can I say shit on the internet?
Yeah.
They say,
Yes.
oh shit, you know, we now have a problem because my HBO is out. I mean, that's what I mean. Until it affects
Stop
your
being distracted.
lifestyle, that's when people stop and go, wait a minute, I didn't realize that this problem is this big, whether it's climate change or the income
Or the
gap
economy,
and whatever
the
those
income
things
gap,
are.
yeah.
That's when it hits, when it impacts your day-to-day experience.
And this is a
But just
significant reason, I'm sorry, why, you know, a significant portion of the population elected Donald Trump. It's like they've been cast aside. I'm talking about the Midwest, most
The Rust
obviously.
Belt. Yeah.
But what you're saying is basically what was your name again?
David.
What David was saying before, which is he's trying to get these conversations online, and what is essential to these conversations is leadership. You know, and I think with all of these communities, you have to have leadership, and there's a real lack of leadership. And I think
leadership training.
well, leadership training, but also coming up with solutions that would actually could compete in this environment. Because I don't think top-down solutions, like political solutions, are going to work.
Right.
I think you really have to have something that's coming out of industry.
Yeah, it's
I want to offer you a different perspective.
Please.
I've heard in pursuing what I've been pursuing, I've heard lots of people tell me, you know, good ideas about how we could make things work better. Lots of people have these good ideas.
It's true.
And actually people are really good problem solvers.
Yeah.
If you get them, you know, to hear a bunch of problems, they'll figure out another answer. I mean, you talk about, I don't know, wanting to find really good leaders, but there's something else. It's like, how do we get together? How do we start? Because everybody's got these ideas.
Right.
So let's just
but,
do it.
okay,
and
so if
fix
we
it
have a
and
lot of
move
really
on.
good ideas, right, in our current political system, you have one guy with a really good idea who starts running for office. Now he's going up against someone else who's running for office with another really good idea, and now those guys are in competition, right? So the political process by nature is going to create a silo effect of those good ideas, right? Whereas if you come at it from a bottom-up perspective, you could really say, okay, this is our goal, let's get this done, let's forget about politics and just get it done. You know, but how could you?
Essential problem of politics right now is the way it is like it's like as if the fact that Donald Trump is the president actually matters on some level. Like the fact of the matter is, if we want to solve these problems, we need to get up off of our asses and start making things happen right here in our own communities, and then we have the power. This is a very I'm going to get on the soapbox for one quick second. And say, I start to feel like this is a very essential time in history because we have more power as the people than we've ever had before, and we have the ability to disseminate information. We have the ability to come together and to group and to form, but that power is in jeopardy right now because somebody's figuring out how to make money off of it. And someone's figuring out how to change the internet so you don't see information anymore. And people are trying to figure out how to keep us under control. And so I think it's very vital that we figure out these pieces of like how to come together online. And I mean that's literally, I really will stop talking in a second, but it's literally why Amy and I started this. Is we sat back in November and we couldn't get out of bed for a couple days like everyone else, and we were like, okay, at least for me, my assumption was half of the country can't be the assholes I think they are, right? So there has to be something I'm missing. Because I'm not hearing them and they're not hearing me, and how do we start having these conversations? And so our whole goal is just do exactly, I think that's like, that kind of got me excited when you were like, well, I guess this is the solution. I'm like, yeah, you're right, this is the solution.
Yeah. But there's another piece here that I'm not hearing. And so let me add it. So it's not apparent yet, but a lot of, people, there's good news here in what I'm going to say, and there's bad news. The bad news is that, the way we've been running our society, which is a top-down model, based on a lot of energy input, is going away because that energy isn't there anymore. We can't run it this way. And so more disseminated solutions, more large institutions are going to become more and more dysfunctional. You already see it. And that's just going to continue, and it's going to get weirder and weirder and weirder. So it's going to be individuals in our location, and I hope the internet stays alive so that projects like yours can do what they do. But really, I think it's the physical people that you're around that are really going to be critical. So as that starts to take hold, I think I just forgot my point, but it was basically tagging on what you were saying.
I was saying that we have more power now than we ever had. We have to be
Well,
careful
right,
with that.
yeah.
The
And I think that's where it's really these solutions are gonna come from.
So let me go into sort of the problem of scale. So we talk about let's all get in together in our communities and get things going, and that's great, and we need to do that. But when I don't know, these organizations are huge, and this country is huge, and we're talking about laws that affect everybody. So if we wanted to talk about, I often use the example of gun control, okay, there just aren't enough people in this community to represent all of the other viewpoints they have in Texas and Louisiana and Florida and stuff like that. So because our humanity scale or America's scale has gotten so large, there's this part that's missing that, we can't talk with all these people, but we're trying to come up with one law that applies to everybody. Now, some of that should be, maybe we shouldn't do that. Maybe we should let the states set their own minimum wage or and experiment and see what works and what doesn't work. And I don't know, that's one part. But there's this other part where this communication that needs to go on is basically being filtered through the mass media that's driven by money. And so these media channels are focusing on the liberals, and these media channels are focusing on the Republicans or the
that's
conservatives.
the nonsense that's out there. And the stuff, the gold is really what's happening amongst individuals, because here's the good news, is that individuals are waking up and that they are acting in their locales, and to the extent they can online, but really it's what they're physically doing in their community. And so I'm talking about people farming and gardening and who knows what else, time banking, and that's what I know about. So, but it's like active local action, and it's totally antithetical to these large institutions. It's just, you got to act locally because that's the only thing that's really functioning.
And to that point, your app is starting with community councils, with neighborhood councils, right? That's the main people. That's the main groups of people. So it's a local solution that can start local, but also join forces with the bigger community, which is part of the scale thing that we were talking about. Is like how do you scale community?
Well, if you get these people from this community online and these people from that community online, they can do their community thing, but now they can talk with each other. And if you just keep adding communities, then and have sort of one place you go for all of this kind of discussion, then
real world
wisdom. I'm sorry, we have it's 8:31 right now. I just want to be cognizant of the time because we are supposed to technically go. I know you probably have to leave also. But we go off live at 8:30. But let's just see what the group. Do you have
I'd say
anyone
anyone who needs to go, by all means, you're more than welcome. And anyone who'd like to continue, we have a couple more. We haven't even gotten to all our questions.
I know we want to talk about projects. That's the one I want everybody to have a chance
to
talk about projects if you want to stay for that. So feel comfortable to leave or stay, whatever you'd like.
So the idea with projects is that we want to. Our whole goal with the conversation is to obviously kind of get on the same page, share ideas, disseminate information, things like that, but then also kind of bring to the table things that you're actually working on that you would either want to share with people or want support in, or maybe looking for ideas and advice, things like that. And then maybe, who knows, maybe your project can help you and you guys can come together. And our goal is just to really actually let's take action, not just talk about it, but let's kind of figure out what does this actually look like on granular, real world level in our lives. So. Cool. There, if that helps a little bit.
And I'm just hearing everyone out in critical legal theory for a while now. There's been this kind of hypothesis that any action really takes place at a local level. So these aren't new notions that we're exploring. This has been something we've studied and we know. I feel like we know, at a very baseline human level, when a community works, and it's not about intention as much as it's I don't know, it's just being part of self-care almost. How we can be a real human is participating in these communities.
Well, I almost like that kind of piggybacks off of what you were saying earlier, that it's really not like the human level, it's the structural level and like the way that like maybe the context that we're in, right? It's not that we can't connect, but the context that we're in literally kind of pits us against each other and separates us when we're really all connected.
Right. I have an example, and talking about sports, my ears lit up because just a really quick project that we've been working on for 6 years, and it literally has evolved. But so we do with Mixed Roots Foundation Adoptee Night, and it's like just like Korean Heritage, Latino, LGBT, and we started with the San Francisco Giants. And I had previously worked with the Korean Heritage Night, and then when the Mixed Roots Foundation was established, I said, do you realize that 6 in 10 people in your stadium has some connection to adoption? There's over 100 million people here in the U.S. that has some connection, and they're like, I'm listening. That's money. That's seats. Filled seats. But then what's interesting when you talk about the identity piece is that it's almost kind of like the LGBT identity, is that no one really knows that you're adopted unless you come out and you actually say it. And in fact, and so when we did our first Adoptee Night event, and we also have a tagline, because then we got feedback saying, well, my child's not adopted. Well, by fact, they are, but maybe they don't call themselves adoptees or adopted. But from a marketing perspective, we had to get the message out saying, hey, there's a shared community of all these adoptees that maybe you don't know about. And also to say, when you're adopted, a lot of people, some of them, internalize that experience. And so by having this out in the public and utilizing the sports platform, it has brought out so many people, and also adoptive parents, foster parents, just having that national dialogue essentially. So since then, we've worked with the MLB, the NBA, the WNBA, MLS. We're expanding to the NFL. We haven't touched NHL yet, but to be able to create that community across the board. And then we're finally, just in the last 2 years, have gotten finally corporate sponsors to step up and to say, we have the president of AT&T of California, he's LGBT, he has 2 mixed adopted kids, his partner's from India. They are the perfect mixed roots model family. But he's now has supported it because he sees that at a critical mass. And it's so funny because I've had my other mentors and advisors say, this is a great idea, but you got to learn how to scale it, and also how you can reach the critical mass to make that change or to make an actual impact. So it's kind of touching on everything that we've talked about. And so it's been amazing. We're now, we just finished our Dodgers Adoptee Night event. It also creates a platform where we can recognize individuals that have that experience, but then also just having some fun. Some of these causes are so, with homelessness, the domestic violence, all these are so personal, and to be able to just come out for a game of sports too.
Right, we're rest. We need rest.
Exactly,
together.
the self-care and just to have some fun, because when you look at these foster care kids that been through the system and wherever they're relocated or allocated, to be able to just come out into a normal setting, and you know that very clearly about being in a regular community versus isolated into just this foster group home or an agency, and to be perceived as that, to just be out in the regular public, it's pretty powerful. So I just want to share that. So we're actually now, we just finished San Francisco, our 3rd annual, and we're going to be going to Minnesota next month for our 5th annual Adoptee Night. And it's interesting because when you talk about identity, we've been able to cross-sect now identities, where our theme this year is I am mixed roots. And then so we have the mixed chicks. I don't know if you've heard of them, but the multicultural pair product line. So we've now incorporated the people that we're featuring have mixed roots, they're mixed families, and we're featuring them at our events. So, but I just wanted to share with the sports thing, and that's it. So if you want to sponsor a kid, or if you want to get involved next year locally, if you know people in Minnesota, the Midwest, we're welcome anyone that wants to get involved.
I'll touch on that just a second because it's a good time to. We're kind of talking about healing here, right? And how and the idea of bringing a group together in person. There is a spiritual connection that happens there, and there's something healing about being in a space where you can tell your story openly and have that sense of belonging with the other people who are there too. So next month in August we're going on a hiatus. We're taking a summer break, and then in September we're going to come back and we're going to talk about healing is going to be the topic that we're going to discuss.
You're all invited back.
Yeah. Yes.
And we, I mean, like, there's no critical mass here. Like, we can always rearrange and reorganize to make room for more people or break up into smaller groups. There's a lot of opportunity here. We just really want to keep these conversations alive and just
healing with regard to community, or in general.
I think that everything is when we talk about community, you're talking about three things, right? You're talking about your relationship with yourself, your relationship with the individuals in the community, and your relationship with the whole community as one. So it's like all those levels. And like we were saying earlier, in order to bring your best to a community, you really have to go in and do that self-healing in order to be kind of the best contributor that you can be. So I think it's all tied together. Yeah.
One of the questions we didn't even get to explore tonight, usually we kind of get into we say what is it, what do we believe about it, what gets in the way, but then it's sort of we take this macro micro level. So we're kind of skipping over that micro piece and because we really just want to hear about what you guys are all up to. But typically we kind of usually talk about what does it look like in our own lives? What does it look like? What are some of the vulnerabilities that come up in community, and what are some of the things that get in the way on that very personal level? And are you involved in community, and what does that look like, and stuff like that. So there are a lot of layers to it, I think. So healing should be really an interesting conversation, I think.
But back to projects about community.
Yes.
Anybody else want to share? I thought I saw Adam making a move over here.
I was going to simply thank you for hosting tonight.
Oh,
I thought you were bringing it.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, yes. I'll give my little spiel at the end.
I'll share. So this is kind of a general statement, but something with the handmade products that we work on, something that really speaks to me is that it offers an opportunity to engage with creative people in our community. So not only the artists that are making the products, but we love to work with people like all of you, or maybe your friends that are creators of things that can come in and partner on project collaborations with us. So an example was several years back, we did a project with Yarn Bombing Los Angeles, and then it was in conjunction with their project at the Art and Craft Museum.
Yeah. Okay.
I said it wrong. The Craft and Folk Art Museum. Wilshire, they did. They crocheted a giant facade to the. Did any of you see that?
No.
So it's a big public art project. So
that.
what they did was they came in. Are you familiar with the yarn bombing? What they do?
No. What is a yarn bombing?
They they create public art. So essentially, they go out into the community and crochet around a fire hydrant.
No, exactly. I've seen the poles with the crochet around them, and I'm like, who?
So they did a big installation. So they worked with us, and they actually had a lot of leftover yarn. So they made blankets for the women that we work with. But they also came in conjunction with that project and helped us create an ornament for Christmas time. That was a little house that the women were able to crochet. So they actually brought in volunteers from their organization to come in and teach workshops at our organization. So it became this big community project, not only connected to larger art organizations, but so it very much touched on that scale of working. They had an exhibit at a large, they had a large art exhibit, but then they came and worked with us on a much smaller personal scale, and then we were actually able to sell that product and create revenue to put back into the programming, and then the women were able to sustain a skill. So it has this multifaceted level. So that's, I think, what I would reach out for is anybody who is interested, has an idea or a collaboration project in mind. We're open to things like that.
There's a whole social impact division of the design school where I studied. And I think kind of perpetual internships would be a great way to
think
bringing young
at
people
Art
in.
Center.
Yes, and
And-
fleece them with their ideas and then get the next
I've
one.
been in contact with.
Repeat. Oh, you've been in touch with them.
That's awesome.
Did you know someone named Connor Johnston who had a group called Woodworks?
I remember Connor
He's
from the
great.
Social Enterprise Alliance. Yeah.
Yeah. Or Laura Zahn runs a wood shop in downtown LA.
Gray zone art spaces that don't really have fire egress, that they need updating and stuff like that. So they've kicked out all these people, and in that process, I've gone to find housing, right? And you can't find anything that was near the price that you were getting in that, because it was this gray zone. So this is a really big idea. Bear with me for a second. But what I want to do is, you have this issue where all the people in downtown, when I was living in downtown, that owned those buildings lived in the Pacific Palisades.
Right.
They lived in the Hollywood Hills.
Yeah.
They lived in other places, and they were taking that money away from the people who were renting there, right? So there is no real collective action for people to get the wealth of their hard work. So you have these hipsters who might move to New York to walk dogs and bust their ass, making $60 grand a year if they're lucky, just to live and experience New York for 10 years. Then they're tired and they feel abused. They feel like the city has been beating them up, and then they leave, and they leave worse off financially, if not the same financially. Like, they're 10 years of busting their butt. If they don't make it, they leave with nothing, right? So how do you tie this demand for rent, with this demand for combining shelter with capital? And I think that it's just collective action, right? And if you can get collective-owned housing, and you can actually pay back the part of the profits from owning capital back to the renters. And so what I'm looking to do is combine sort of a group housing project and community housing, and tie in communal elements with that, with a refund program that's like a proof of rent algorithm. So the renters actually get money back in the form of a blockchain currency that they can then go spend in a merchant network that we go around. And I've already been talking to people in downtown that are owned and operated businesses that are not focused solely on profits. Like, obviously you have to make money. I don't care if you're a for-profit business, but when I go in, does it look like you bought all of your stuff from Silo and you're just cutting corners to make a buck off me? Or are you trying to say, no, I'm going to give you the best breakfast sandwich that I can for $6 or $8, right? So I'm going to businesses like that, businesses that are having they're trying to make a culture in and of themselves and say, hey, will you accept? And for Los Angeles, I'm calling it the La Reina, the La Reina of Los Angeles. Yeah. So the currency is the La Reina, or La Reina. And so you're tying in this complex capital ownership structure to sort of a rent distribution of wealth. And I think it would be extremely powerful. I mean, this is like a 100-year solution to the corporation, right? But what this would do is you're creating a unit that can operate on scale that's human, that you would have the way that I'm envisioning it is each building that would be, I call it a resident organization, would have, the resident leader of that each building. And each building would also have, part commercial, part industry on their floors, depending on, retail, commercial, first floor. You might have industry, sort of artistic studios, different type of creative things, second floor. And then you have living spaces. And so how do you tie together all of these things that you need and still get that capital ownership? So you could rent from one of these things, one of these resident organizations, and you still spend your $1,000 a month, $2,000, whatever you cost for rent. But now you're getting back 150 reinas. But since the way that the blockchain asset ledger works is it goes on the asset ledger, your rent is backing the currency itself. So your rent is in perpetuity because you own these buildings. So the organization owns the buildings, but then they're also collecting rents on these buildings. And they're giving part of that rent back, all that basically just revenue back to the renters. And so you're incentivizing the local community, you're incentivizing everyone around you to not just cut corners. You're trying to, what I would love to do is right now you walk around downtown, every single one of those buildings is trying to exploit you for capital, right? But if you walk down into a city where every single building was one of these resident-backed organizations, they wouldn't need to try to exploit you. they could do whatever they wanted to do. And so their intents would be free. And so that's the city that I want to live in. And it doesn't exist, and I would love to live there, and I want to make it. But,
We're making it.
yeah, no, but it's through market forces, though, right? It's how do you get this through not politics, through...
How do you explain it simply so people can buy in?
You read the PDF? It's hard. It's hard.
I've actually heard of what you're talking about.
Well, and it's a lot of new technology,
Yeah, and it's,
so as people become
very,
more,
I think it'll happen.
mindset.
Yeah,
It's beautiful.
I think so. It's really cool. I would love to see it be pushed forward. But yeah, my ask to you is, I was kicked out of a house in, or at my art studio in, March? And I've been wanting to pursue this full time, and I just can't. And so like I have no idea. Like, sure, I can do grant proposals and write grants, and I'm trying to get the website. I'm a producer, so I can do all the media.
Yeah.
But what I don't have is like short-term funding. You know, like how do you even get the ball rolling?
Yeah.
There's an event you should come to. It's next Tuesday night in Pasadena. That's all about impact investing.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
You don't really need a grant. You need an impact investor.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Because
I need someone who likes the idea.
Yeah,
and says,
because
"Let's do it."
there's a model there that I mean, there might be some grant money out there, but it's too long of a road to go. You need an investor who can
Right.
see and has the vision and wants to have a social impact as well as a financial
Right.
impact. So I'll give you.
I'm in
the info.
Pasadena. I might join.
Yeah, so that's my
I was
project.
just going to say the same thing you're describing as the problem with housing. Same thing could be said for food.
Yeah.
There's plenty of food
Absolutely.
to feed everybody globally.
Yeah.
We just
Yeah.
can't distribute it because of money.
Right.
Yep.
You know, it costs too
Right.
much.
We have problems of Problems of we live in an abundant society, not a scarce society. So we don't have problems of scarcity, we have problems of abundance. And the chief problem of abundance is distribution.
right.
I want to talk to you more about what you're thinking, because I feel like it'd be so cool to like start putting some like stories together with it, right? I feel like the best way to like talk about that's going to be story, and start to make videos to really share. Because I feel like if you have like a bomb video and like you have like your media in order, which I know you're like already a powerhouse, I feel like you could do some killer crowdfunding.
I think I think crowdfunding is the way to go, but it's literally
because you're getting people to buy in on their own investment.
Right.
Like, this is something that returns really well for people.
Absolutely.
Like as a business, we're in.
As a business, well, also it's just like the hot thing right now is ICOs, and I was thinking of doing an ICO, initial coin offering. So it's very it's a very new sort of thing that's going on with these cryptocurrencies, and they're called these type of organizations are called DAOs or DApps, which is distributed apps or distributed automatic organization. There's this whole thing called Ethereum, which everyone here should know about, in smart contracts and blockchain. Like, this is going to change the world. It's really crazy stuff.
You heard it.
But yeah.
I think I connect you to this because he keeps calling me about this. And
Ethereum is very, very cool. It's very cool stuff.
Ethereum?
Yeah.
Ethereum. I'm going to look it up tonight.
I will say it's about 9 o'clock, so probably now would be a good time at least to wrap this, and then anyone who wants to stay, we're not going to kick you out. So you're more than welcome. We'll just go offline at this point if that's
slumber
works.
party. No.
Yeah.
Anybody else have one?
Three quick projects?
Yeah.
I got one as well.
Oh yeah, no, let's keep going.
So I told you
Is the
about
internet still on?
Internet's still on. It'll be a bomb.
I told you about the piano orchestra. I'm trying to make that available to piano teachers and students around the city. So
Where's that
that's one.
located?
Huh?
Where's the
I'm in
space?
Pasadena.
Okay.
But the other one is I put a piano on a bicycle cart, and I tow it to business districts, and I'm basically going to public events, and the idea is to sort of create community on the spot.
Wow,
piano a la carte.
Nice.
Piano man. We should do a video about you. I love that.
Yeah, the piano man.
We'll talk. But two community-based projects is this group, Transition Pasadena, we've created something called Repair Cafe, which is, the idea is, instead of throwing your broken whatever away, don't buy a new one, get it fixed. And so you may know that companies are making things very hard to fix these days. Whole built-in obsolescence problem. Anyway, so we're fixing once a quarter. We have about 60 volunteers that show up, and we service about 60 or 70 clients on a particular day.
And it's like a party.
And it's like a party.
Really
and all
fun.
that stuff that gets fixed, it's diverted from the landfill.
The trash bill.
And the other project was the Time Bank. And the Time Bank has This is neighbors exchanging services without money, and essentially we're exchanging time credits. And we've had as many as 1,300 members based around the city. We have little neighborhoods now, and you know, it's good for people who have time. It doesn't work so well for people who don't have time. But if you have time, you know, it's about creating relationships. So there's a very big community building aspect to this, because it takes two people to really create the transaction, co-production, as opposed to what money does, which is you walk in, you pay your dollar, and you demand the service. So there's more of a co-production aspect to this. And so it builds relationships. And we've built all of those relationships that we can put on a repair cafe through time banking. So we pay people hours instead of money. And a lot of people volunteer and they love it and they do it whether we pay them hours or not. But there is some value there that they can turn around. So
we should talk after about time.
Let's talk.
I was gonna say one
this
small
is
thing.
very
I think
related.
what we need to do is maybe we'll share everyone's maybe we'll do an email afterwards, or we can share everyone's contact in a quick summary. Like you already have such beautiful summaries for everyone, and that way we can all be able to interconnect, because I feel like there's a lot of beautiful overlap.
Is everybody okay if I share it?
And get a picture from the live stream with everyone's like.
I know, right?
Spend time. What was the name?
I want to do. I want to connect so that I can see the progress of all the projects and get involved.
And we have a private Facebook group, so we'll invite you to the private Facebook group.
Yeah, that's
also,
a good
so we
place
can
as well. Like if you want to, as far as especially with the project piece, like if you want to be like, hey, this cool new thing happened, then we can all get excited about it with you and everything like that. So.
Want to hear his project?
It's a local project, but it has national and possibly international implications. In large part, some of you may have heard that likely somewhere in either 2024 or 2028, the Olympics and Paralympics will be coming to Los Angeles. The decision will come down in September, the vote in the IOC. But that decision impacts a program that I work with locally called Angel City Sports. It's a 3-year-old nonprofit organization that provides sports for people with physical disabilities. It's a pretty unique community, and it's a community that is extremely diverse and extremely fragmented, because you're dealing with people with a wide array of physical impairments, from spinal cord injury and spina bifida to amputees to the visually impaired, cerebral palsy, MS, muscular dystrophy, and a myriad of other ailments that you've never heard of. And so what's interesting is this community never aggregates except when they get together to play sports. Because if you have a spinal cord injury, you're going to spinal rehab. If you're an amputee, you go see a prosthetist. If you're visually impaired, you go see an ophthalmologist. You're never, ever really together as a, quote, disability community. But when an adaptive sports program creates an event or creates a clinic, that's when the community can actually come together. Within, there is still a lot of challenges, because somebody who's visually impaired can't get in a wheelchair and play wheelchair basketball, but they can. There are other sports, and then there are certain sports just created for people with a visual impairment or certain physical disabilities. So it's a complex space, but this program that's been around now for 3 years is trying to put programming in place in Southern California that hasn't existed. For many years, people thought
sustainable programming.
Well, yeah, and I think a lot of people just assumed, oh, well, it's Southern California and there's sports everywhere and people are so active, and that there's probably a sports program for the person in a wheelchair. Well, unfortunately, there hasn't been, partially due to the cost. It's not cheap to put these programs together. It requires a lot of equipment, experienced coaches, and access to facilities, and all those things add up. And it's logistically really hard in Southern California. It's a geography that scales out, over miles and miles, and there's 20 million people in the 5 counties, and how do you provide programming for all of that? So it hadn't really been done, and a gentleman took it upon himself to say, we're going to figure out how to do that. So I've been working with him since he started over 3 years ago, and we're now, we just completed our 3rd annual Angel City Games at UCLA. It was a 4-day event with 5 different adaptive sports, and we had athletes from not only Southern Cal, we had athletes from 15 states travel in because they don't get opportunities for a competitive type of an event. So with the Paralympics coming 7 or 11 years from now, and it is a little bit of a long ways away, it could have an impact like what happened in London in 2012 when they hosted the Paralympic Games in London. it really moved things forward for the disability community. People finally saw somebody in a wheelchair or somebody who was an amputee as an athlete and what they were capable of doing, and not what they didn't have, but who they were. So the hope is that by having this global event here, and then having a local program that can kind of be the legacy piece, we can continue to kind of build on that and share that message nationally. And I'll kind of wrap it up with this. The other big piece that makes this community so difficult sometimes to kind of create programming and build around is, to some degree, they're competing with, and I use that in loose terms, with the Special Olympics. And the Special Olympics is for people with intellectual and cognitive disabilities. I've been working with them for the past 9 years. It's an amazing program. It does incredible work. But it's been around for 50 years. It's very well established through the Kennedy and Shriver family in Washington, D.C. It is one global brand. And it is clean and simple and easy for a corporate partner. You mentioned that. It's so easy for a corporate partner to come in and get engaged. And you come over to the world of physical disabilities, and it is the complete opposite.
Right.
It is not one global brand. It is a myriad of fragmented little organizations. And it is not clean and simple, and it has actually been around for 50 years, but you wouldn't know it. So it's been really hard for that community to access corporate partners and larger sponsors because they can't figure it out. And it's too hard to spread the money around across a myriad of programs. So it's a unique space, but what we're trying to build here in Southern Cal, we have the power of LA and the media and the celebrities and everything that we can do to draw attention here, and then hopefully in 7-11 years we're going to have a global event to shine a bigger light on it. So I'm excited about what we're doing there.
And there's no way that, this is what's interesting of cross-secting the causes, because the Special Olympics do have some disability, though, physical disability. So
occasionally they do. So I won't get into the nuances of where the overlap is because there is.
Everybody wants their own.
Exactly, and it does. It muddies the water. I will say this though, and it's a statement that the founder of the program makes, and it is pretty impactful. And he says that having a physical disability, it's the only minority group that anybody can become a part of, just like that.
That's true.
And it's really true. You don't think about it until it, again, like I said, until it impacts you, until it impacts your life. But as soon as you're somebody, or somebody in your family has lost their sight, a limb, their ability to walk, now all of a sudden, well, wait a minute, they still want to participate. They still want to be out and doing recreation and sports. So now all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, how do we do that? So it's a really interesting space that really straddles every part of society. Youth, adult, we have a huge veterans community. It's a lot of people, and it's much bigger. Ironically, it's much bigger than the intellectual and cognitive disability community. Much larger community, but it's just so fragmented, it's hard to really wrap your head around it.
You've already thought about partnering with the hospital, like maybe you told
we do. Yeah, we do a lot with the hospitals. Yeah, that's the key to get to at least youth and then people in rehab. But yeah, it's a long, challenging space. It's not. It doesn't get solved overnight. So it's something I've been working on and will continue to be working on for a long time.
Very worthy for the hard work.
Thank you all so much for being here. This is an incredible conversation. We're just honored to be with you and thankful for the work that each of you guys are doing in the world. It's so powerful and completely inspiring. So we'll be back here in September, and thank you.
See you then.
So with that timeshare app idea.